Most people do not stay broke because they are lazy. They stay broke because the voice in their head sounds responsible while it quietly kills every move that could change their life. It does not sound destructive. It sounds mature. It sounds careful. It sounds intelligent. It sounds like protection, and that is why it works. A reckless thought is easy to reject. A weak thought dressed up as wisdom can live in your mind for 20 years. That is the nerve this book presses on. On the cover it says, "Your thinking keeps you poor." Next to it, the subtitle says, "The phrases in your head that make a person weak and poor." Not the economy keeps you poor, not bad luck keeps you poor, not some faceless villain in a tower. Your thinking. Not because the outside world does not matter, it does. It matters a lot. But the outside world hits everyone. What decides who adapts, who freezes, who learns, who hides, who gets paid, who gets overlooked, is often the private language nobody else hears. Poverty does not always begin in the wallet. Many times it begins in the sentence. It begins in the quiet line repeated during the walk to work, during the late-night scroll, during the moment before posting, before pitching, before applying, before charging more, before learning the new tool, before asking for help, before showing your face, before saying yes to a bigger life. The phrase sounds harmless, then it becomes a habit. The habit becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes identity. Then one day the bank balance simply catches up with the script already running in the mind. This is why so many capable people stay stuck, while less thoughtful people move past them. Intelligence by itself does not save you. In fact, intelligence often becomes the perfect defense system for staying exactly where you are. A smart person can explain their own paralysis beautifully. They can turn hesitation into philosophy. They can turn fear into standards. They can turn envy into criticism. They can turn inaction into reflection. They can build a whole cathedral of reasons to avoid the one thing that matters, testing themselves in reality. You can see it everywhere in 2026. People know more than ever and move less than ever. Their phones are full of saved clips about wealth, leverage, productivity, personal branding, AI agents, remote income, content strategy, fintech habits, high-value skills, portfolio careers, online offers, creator monetization. They can explain the difference between 10 business models and still have no offer, no audience, no upgraded skill, no second income, no real proof of work. They are informed but not transformed. They are mentally busy and financially stagnant. They consume solutions the way other people consume dessert. This book feels brutal because it refuses to flatter that behavior. It says the problem is not just that you have been underpaid, overlooked, unsupported, or distracted. The problem is that somewhere along the way you started speaking weakness so often that it began to sound like your real personality. You started repeating lines that protect you from embarrassment, rejection, uncertainty, and visible effort. Then you called that caution. Then you called it character. Then you called it realism. Meanwhile, the world kept rewarding people who were willing to look clumsy for a while, visible for a while, uncertain for a while, and uncomfortable for a while. One of the most dangerous phrases in the whole book is, "I'm just being realistic." People say it like a badge of maturity. But most of the time it is not realism. It is disappointment wearing a tie. Realism looks at the situation clearly and asks what can still be done. Weak realism looks at the situation emotionally and decides movement is pointless. Real realism says rent is rising, salaries are unstable, AI is changing workflows, attention is fragmented, competition is global, so I need to become more adaptable, more visible, more useful, and more valuable. Fake realism says rent is rising, salaries are unstable, AI is changing workflows, attention is fragmented, competition is global, so there is no point trying. That phrase has ruined more lives than obvious stupidity ever could. Because when you call your fear realistic, nobody argues with you, not even you. You stop there. You do not test the freelance offer. You do not open the camera. You do not learn the software that can cut 10 hours of labor into 2. You do not build the portfolio. You do not ask for the raise. You do not package the skill. You do not improve the pitch. You do not move cities. You do not start the channel. You do not create the digital product. You do not become the person who can survive a rough market. You become the person who narrates the rough market while somebody else adapts inside it. Then there is the phrase, "People like me do not get rich." Listen to how deep that goes. It is not about money. It is about belonging. The sentence says wealth is for another species, another background, another personality type, another family, another circle, another face, another accent, another kind of confidence. Once that sentence lands, you do not just doubt the goal. You exile yourself from it. You stop reading success as information and start reading it as proof that you are outside the gate. Every wealthy person becomes either a freak, a fraud, or an exception. That way you never have to seriously study what they did right. The book tears that excuse apart because it shows how identity can become a financial prison. A person can be poor in money and also loyal to poverty as a social tribe. They do not want the stress of growth, the visibility of ambition, the awkwardness of changing habits, the tension of outgrowing old conversations. They say they want freedom, but they panic at anything that would separate them from the emotional comfort of being familiar. It feels safer to stay the same and call it authenticity. It feels safer to say, "I am not that kind of person," than to admit you are terrified of becoming unfamiliar to yourself. Another phrase that sounds innocent is, "I need more time before I start." Time for what? Time to become fearless, time to become certain, time for the market to calm down, time for the children to grow, time for work to ease up, time for the anxiety to leave, time for the economy to make sense, time for your energy to return, time for the right setup, time for the ideal plan, time for the pressure to disappear. But life does not clear a runway for transformation. Life keeps moving while you keep postponing. And the longer you wait to feel ready, the more your current habits harden. This is one of the sharpest ideas in the book. Delay is not neutral. Delay is training. Every day you do not act, you rehearse not acting. Every week you keep the idea in your head instead of putting it into the world. You strengthen the identity of someone who thinks instead of someone who executes. The nervous system gets used to hesitation. The future becomes a storage unit for all the hard things you are too soft to face right now. Then years pass, and you still describe yourself as someone who is about to begin. About to begin is one of the saddest permanent addresses on earth. "I am not ready yet" is a close cousin. It sounds thoughtful, even humble. But readiness is one of the biggest scams the mind ever created. Ready for what? Nobody is ready to sell for the first time. Nobody is ready to speak on camera for the first time. Nobody is ready to charge money for an idea that used to live in their head for free. Nobody is ready to enter a crowded market and discover they are average at first. Nobody is ready to be ignored. Nobody is ready to publish 10 videos that barely move. Nobody is ready to send an application and get no reply. Readiness is not what comes before action. Readiness is what action slowly builds. The world now punishes hesitation faster than before. In 2026, tools evolve every few months. Industries shift under your feet. A person who says, "I will learn AI later," is not postponing a hobby. They are postponing relevance. A designer who refuses generative workflows because they feel weird may soon find themselves competing with faster people who use those tools responsibly. A marketer who keeps saying the old way still works may wake up with half their tasks automated and no new edge. A remote worker who sees the global market closing in and still refuses to sharpen communication, proof of work, and visible credibility is not staying calm. They are slowly becoming optional. One of the ugliest little lines in the weak mind is, "I do not know enough yet." On the surface, it sounds noble. Nobody wants to mislead people. Nobody wants to look foolish. Nobody wants to sell low-quality work. Fair. But this phrase usually appears long after the person knows enough to begin. It is not protecting standards. It is protecting ego. The person has enough to make a first offer, a small service, a starter product, a useful channel, a basic consultation, a test project. But they hide inside research because research gives the pleasure of progress without the risk of judgment. That is why one more course becomes a drug, one more tutorial, one more productivity app, one more framework, one more saved thread, one more expert breakdown, one more prompt pack, one more note-taking system, one more finance podcast on the way to a job they hate. Knowledge feels clean, execution feels messy. Knowledge can be private, execution can fail in public. So the person keeps upgrading the shelf in their head while their life on the outside stays exactly the same size. They know a lot about monetization but have never made an offer. They know a lot about content strategy but have never posted consistently. They know a lot about AI agents but have never used one to reduce costs, improve service, or create leverage. The book does not attack learning. It attacks learning used as camouflage. There is a difference between building competence and hiding in preparation. Competence says I learned enough to test. Camouflage says I learned enough to postpone with confidence. That is overthinking with good grammar. It sounds smart. It even looks responsible from the outside. But the bank balance does not care how sophisticated your avoidance sounds. Money usually flows toward usefulness that has entered reality, not potential that stayed elegant in private. Then comes the sentence people love to whisper after they have already talked themselves out of competing. The market is too saturated. This line has become a modern lullaby for talented people who cannot bear the idea of being ordinary at the beginning. They look at a crowded field and decide crowd means impossible. But most markets are not lost because too many people exist. They are lost because too many people are generic, inconsistent, invisible, lazy with details, weak under rejection, and addicted to quick validation. Saturation is often just a polite word for, I do not want to earn attention. Look around. Millions of creators post. Most are forgettable. Thousands of freelancers offer similar services. Most communicate badly. Countless people sell templates, edits, strategy, design, code, coaching, curation, automation, support, research, writing, community management, sales help, AI implementation. Most of them disappear because they do not stay with the process long enough to become distinct. They do not listen deeply enough to real pain. They do not sharpen the offer enough. They do not understand that in a crowded market, clarity matters more, trust matters more, proof matters more, and patience matters more. When someone says everything good is already taken, what they often mean is, I wanted a clean road with no discomfort. They wanted an open niche, no competition, instant praise, and a straight path to income. They did not want to enter a noisy world and build signal. But that is what adults do. Adults do not wait for empty rooms. They learn to become obvious inside busy rooms. They solve specific problems. They improve real outcomes. They understand that being early is not the only advantage. Being better at observing, listening, packaging, following through, and staying visible can beat being early. Another soft little killer is, I will start when life calms down. That phrase has probably delayed more careers than failure itself. Life does not calm down. Costs rise, phones buzz, parents age, children need things, the job shifts, the landlord changes the rent, the news gets darker, the platform changes the algorithm, the inbox fills. The body gets tired. Some new subscription pulls money from the account. The calendar grows teeth. If your plan depends on a peaceful season, your plan is fantasy. Most meaningful things are built in imperfect conditions by people who stop negotiating with reality and start working inside it. This matters because the waiting person always imagines future action as clean and strong. In their mind, when life finally settles, they will become focused, disciplined, creative, and brave. But habits do not appear because the weather changed. If you cannot move in chaos, you will not suddenly become dangerous in peace. If you cannot protect one focused hour now, you will not protect 3 later. If you cannot put up one rough post now, you will not magically build a brand later. If you cannot sell one simple service now, you will not suddenly launch a polished business when the stars align. The book is merciless with a phrase a lot of people treat like a personality trait. I am bad at selling. Usually what that means is I am uncomfortable with being seen wanting something. I am uncomfortable hearing no. I am uncomfortable asking for money. I am uncomfortable standing behind the value I can create. I am uncomfortable being associated with persuasion because I have confused selling with manipulation. So instead of learning honest sales, the person stays invisible and then wonders why nobody pays them. This is one of the biggest contradictions in modern life. People say they want freedom, but refuse the human skill tied to freedom. Selling is not some dirty trick from another species. It is how value moves. Every raise request is a sale. Every interview is a sale. Every portfolio is a sale. Every proposal is a sale. Every post designed to attract the right client is a sale. Every clear explanation of why your skill matters is a sale. If you hate selling because you hate pressure, fine, hate pressure. But learn clean communication. Learn how to describe a problem and a result. Learn how to ask. Learn how to follow up without apology. Learn how to let people decide. Refusing all forms of selling is often just choosing quiet poverty over awkward growth. The phrase "I do not want to look desperate" does its own damage. It sounds like dignity, but many times it is vanity in a nicer outfit. People would rather protect an image of effortless cool than make the necessary ask that might change their income. They do not want to message the potential client twice. They do not want to tell their audience what they offer. They do not want to invite people into the product. They do not want to say the price out loud. They do not want to admit they care about building something that pays. So they stay tasteful, unbothered, and broke. There is a whole section in this book about the fear of attention. It hits hard because so many people claim they want results while resisting the visibility connected to results. They want the business, but not the face. The clients, but not the reputation work. The creator income, but not the creator discomfort. The opportunities, but not the public learning curve. They say I do not want attention as if attention is vanity. But in a world where trust, proof, and opportunity increasingly move through visible signals, refusing all attention is not humility. It is self-erasure. Someone has to know you exist. Someone has to understand what you do. Someone has to connect your name to useful outcomes. And yes, some people will judge you. Some will laugh at the early videos. Some will think your first offer is basic. Some will ignore the first 10 posts. Some will watch silently for months before they ever respect you. So what? Embarrassment is expensive when it controls your choices. Fear of looking foolish becomes fear of opportunity. Fear of being seen weak becomes a guarantee that nobody will ever see you strong. This is why the book keeps repeating a harsh truth. A lot of adults are not losing to lack of talent. They are losing to emotional fragility. Then comes the elegant excuse dressed up as discipline. I need certainty first. No, you do not. You need enough clarity to test responsibly. Certainty is not available. Not in markets, not in content, not in freelancing, not in career shifts, not in launching a product, not in building an audience, not in moving from employee thinking to owner thinking. The person demanding certainty is asking life for a guarantee before they agree to grow. But life does not hand out guarantees to the timid. It offers feedback to the active. The same goes for I will wait for the perfect moment. Perfect is a delay tactic with clean shoes. The perfect moment is just the imagined version of action with no emotional cost. No bad timing, no resistance, no rejection, no awkward first draft, no public flaws, no cash flow pressure, no doubt, no fatigue, no competition, no reality. But reality is where income comes from. Real people buy imperfect offers. Real careers are built through ugly first versions. Real channels start with uneven videos. Real service businesses begin with starter clients. Real confidence comes after enough direct contact with difficulty. It is too late now is another line that quietly amputates the future. Too late compared to whom? The teenager with a viral channel. The person who learned code at 12. The founder who started during a strange window. The creator who had first mover advantage. Fine. Maybe you are later than somebody. That tells you nothing about what is still possible. A lot of people use time as a shield because they cannot bear the pain of beginning below their self-image. They say it is too late because late feels more dignified than scared. The book brings this into the open with brutal honesty. Some people would rather protect the fantasy of what they could have been than risk discovering what they can still become. That is why they live in comparison. Comparison lets them grieve an imagined superior version of themselves without doing the awkward work required by the present. They compare their chapter 1 to another person's chapter 20 and call the gap evidence of impossibility. But the real damage is not emotional. It is financial. While you keep measuring yourself against someone already moving, you are still not moving. And motion is what creates options. One of the most poisonous lines in the book is, "At least I am safe." Safe where? In the job 1 update away from redundancy. In the role that has not grown your market value in 3 years. In the routine where expenses rise faster than skills. In the city you cannot afford but refuse to leave. In the schedule that drains you so completely that you have no energy left to build leverage. In the identity of the careful person who never swings and therefore never wins. Safety is often just slow decline with less adrenaline. This matters now more than ever because old forms of security are getting thinner. The stable company is restructuring. The comfortable middle role is being squeezed by automation from below and strategic pressure from above. The fixed salary feels respectable until you realize subscriptions, housing, transport, food, insurance, and random digital spending have been eating the margin alive. The paycheck that once felt adult now feels like a treadmill. Yet many people keep worshiping stability as if the word itself pays bills. Stability without growth is only a slower kind of danger. The book exposes how people romanticize being low risk while their life becomes high pressure anyway. They avoid the discomfort of building new income, but they do not avoid stress. They avoid the embarrassment of visibility, but they do not avoid resentment. They avoid asking for more money, but they do not avoid money anxiety. They avoid learning how to sell, but they do not avoid being dependent. They avoid trying something uncertain, but they do not avoid the certainty of being stuck. That is the real insult. Weak thinking does not remove pain. It only chooses a pain that feels more familiar. There is a line intelligent people especially love. I am thinking things through. Sometimes that is true. Often it is the language of elegant paralysis. The person has 3 documents, 4 spreadsheets, a note system, 7 possible brand names, saved examples, watch tutorials, refined plans, and no direct contact with the market. They have been thinking things through for 8 months and still have nothing alive outside their skull. Meanwhile, someone less polished has already put out 20 messy versions, learned from the response, improved the offer, and started earning. This is why the book says overthinking becomes poverty with good grammar. The words are neat. The logic is detailed. The caution sounds grown up. But underneath it is the same old refusal to collide with reality. Reality is where your pricing is tested. Reality is where your messaging is tested. Reality is where your confidence is tested. Reality is where your ability to handle silence, low response, rough feedback, and imperfect performance gets built. No amount of internal rehearsal can replace that. Thinking is useful when it serves movement. Thinking is destructive when it becomes a private theater where you feel busy while staying hidden. Then the script goes after another modern addiction. I just need motivation. No, you need standards. Motivation is unstable. It comes and goes with sleep, blood sugar, stress, weather, screen overload, relationship noise, and random emotional swings. If your progress depends on feeling inspired, you will keep living in emotional weather. The weak mind uses motivation as a condition for action because it wants comfort before effort. The stronger mind uses action to create momentum, even when the feeling is absent. You can see the trap clearly in digital life. A person spends 2 hours watching videos about discipline, takes notes that make them feel temporarily powerful, saves 3 clips about high-income skills, maybe buys a cheap course, reorganizes the desk, downloads an app, and then does nothing difficult. They confuse the sensation of activation with actual movement. The brain gets the reward of intention without the cost of execution. That is why so much modern self-improvement leaves people more stimulated and less changed. The phrase "I need to feel inspired" first works the same way. It sounds artistic, deep, maybe even authentic. But for most people, it is emotional dependence. They are waiting for a mood that lets them work without friction. They are not trying to create a new life. They are trying to bypass the unpleasant parts of building one. The problem is that money respects consistency more than mood. Clients respect reliability more than moods. Audiences trust rhythm more than moods. Skill compounds through repetition, not emotional permission. Then there is the soft resentment line. I am not lucky like them. Luck is real. Timing is real. Networks are real. Family support is real. Uneven starting points are real. The book does not insult reality by denying that. What it attacks is the way some people use luck as a final explanation instead of one factor among many. They say luck like a judge banging a hammer. Case closed. No need to study behavior. No need to improve positioning. No need to strengthen resilience. No need to become easier to trust. No need to learn how visible opportunities are actually built over time. A lot of luck is attracted by movement. Not magical movement, practical movement. Showing work repeatedly. Building a useful body of proof. Being around people because you chose to participate. Following up, shipping, improving, being findable, being clear, being the kind of person whose name can come up in a room because your work has actually touched reality. People call the result luck because they do not see the unpaid reps. They do not see the early embarrassing drafts, the ignored messages, the offers that failed, the dead posts, the boring days. Weak minds love luck because luck protects them from responsibility. I would do it if I had support sounds fair at first. Support helps, community helps, encouragement helps. But hidden inside that sentence is often a child waiting for permission. The adult part of life begins when you stop treating understanding from others as a requirement for your own movement. Sometimes nobody claps. Sometimes your circle does not get it. Sometimes your family prefers the old version of you. Sometimes your friends support your comfort more than your growth because your growth would expose their own stagnation. Waiting for support can become another polished way to stay still. The book is sharp on this because it knows something painful. Staying weak comes with social rewards. When you stay small, nobody feels threatened. When you stay confused, nobody feels left behind. When you keep joking about money instead of building capacity, everybody relaxes. Growth can isolate you for a while because growth changes rhythm, language, standards, and identity. Some people know this subconsciously. They would rather remain relatable than become respected. They would rather keep belonging than start becoming. So they say support is missing when the deeper truth is that they are scared of separation. I have bigger problems right now is another trap. Sometimes it is true. Real problems hit. Health, debt, grief, family pressure, survival stress. But even then the phrase can quietly become permanent. There is always a bigger problem. That is the nature of life. The question is whether you use difficulty as a reason to abandon your future or as a reason to build it more seriously. A person under pressure may not be able to do everything, but they can usually do something. Learn one tool, send one pitch, build one sample, cut one wasteful habit, protect 1 hour, improve one skill. Start small enough that reality cannot veto movement. The weak mind hates that idea because small action feels unimpressive. It wants the clean, dramatic reset. Monday, new month, new year. Better energy, better setup, full plan. But small action is where identity changes. The person who cannot yet build a business can still become a person who no longer lies to themselves daily. The person who cannot instantly double income can still become a person who stops spending 3 dead hours every night inside short-form sludge. The person who cannot yet leave the job can still become a person who treats the evening like a workshop instead of a recovery pit. One phrase in this fictional book may offend people because it reaches into modern polite culture and drags out the rot. I do not care about money that much. Sometimes this is true in a healthy sense. Money is not the only value, fine, but many times this line is not spirituality, it is avoidance. It is the language people use when they are afraid of the effort, visibility, negotiation, and self-confrontation connected to earning more. They pretend to stand above money because they feel beneath the behaviors required to improve their relationship with it. The book says something very adult here. You do not have to worship money to take it seriously. You do not have to become greedy to become financially stronger. Money is not only consumption, it is capacity. It is margin. It is choice. It is distance from panic. It is the ability to help, leave, relocate, recover, invest, breathe, and refuse nonsense. Saying you do not care about money can feel noble until an emergency arrives, an opportunity appears, your energy crashes, your rent jumps, or your parent needs support. Then suddenly the thing you claimed not to care about decides how much dignity you have access to. There is also the phrase, money changes people. Sometimes it does. Pressure also changes people. Scarcity changes people. Dependence changes people. Hidden envy changes people. The point is not that money is pure. The point is that people often use fear of corruption as an excuse to remain powerless. They would rather stay constrained and morally comfortable than become financially stronger and face the responsibility of handling more capacity well. That is fear disguised as ethics. Stronger thinking says more money will amplify what is already in me. So I need character and skill, not avoidance. Then the book attacks a favorite line of the wounded ego. I am different from those people. Maybe you mean the loud, fake gurus. Good. Be different. Maybe you mean manipulative sellers. Good. Be different. Maybe you mean shallow creators chasing attention with no substance. Fine. Be different. But many people use difference as a hiding place. They define themselves against caricatures, so they never have to build anything real. They say I am different from those people while secretly meaning I am too uncomfortable to compete in public. Difference without production is just identity theater. That connects to another dangerous sentence. I am too smart to do shallow things. This one destroys a lot of promising people because it lets them confuse simplicity with stupidity. They refuse to make clear content because clarity feels basic. They refuse to sell visible offers because promotion feels cheap. They refuse to repeat useful messages because repetition feels beneath them. They want depth without reach, craft without distribution, skill without sales, intelligence without market contact. Then they wonder why less thoughtful people earn more. Because the world does not only reward depth, it rewards communicated value. A deep idea poorly packaged can starve next to a simple idea clearly delivered. This is not unfair. It is reality. If your intelligence keeps you allergic to simplicity, your intelligence is serving your ego, not your future. The book is ruthless about this. It says many people stay broke because they want to be perceived as refined more than they want to become effective. They cling to complexity because complexity protects them from the humiliation of being understood and then judged directly. The phrase, I do not want to bother people, reveals another hidden weakness. The person is not actually worried about bothering people. They are worried about the feeling that comes if the other person ignores them. They are worried about the bruise to self-image. So they avoid sending the message, asking for the sale, making the invitation, offering the help, following up on the proposal, posting the link, or stating clearly what they do. They tell themselves they are being respectful. Sometimes they are simply being avoidant. The stronger replacement is simple and adult. Be clear, be honest, be useful, and let people decide. That is not bothering people. That is participating in the marketplace of attention and value. If your offer is weak, improve it. If your message is vague, sharpen it. If your follow-up feels needy, make it more precise and respectful. But do not disappear behind politeness while your life shrinks. Excessive niceness often hides fear, and fear is expensive when it stops you from being known. The book keeps returning to one ugly but necessary insight. Weak internal language always gives you an emotional payoff. That is why it survives. I am being realistic protects you from disappointment. I am not ready protects you from embarrassment. I need more time protects you from exposure. The market is saturated protects you from competing. I am bad at selling protects you from asking. I do not care about money protects you from confronting your financial weakness. I need certainty protects you from risk. At least I am safe protects you from the identity shock of change. Every weak phrase is a shield. The problem is that shields are heavy, and people end up carrying them so long that they forget they were meant to move. This is where the book becomes more than criticism. It starts replacing the old script with cleaner truths. Not slogans, not fake hype. Cleaner truths. I can act before I feel ready. I can learn in public without treating early imperfection as a personal tragedy. I can care about money without letting it own my values. I can sell honestly because selling is part of helping. I can handle being seen. I can survive a no. I can improve under exposure. I can build skill through repetition instead of waiting for confidence to descend from the ceiling. That kind of thinking sounds plain, but it is powerful because it removes drama. Weak thinking is usually dramatic. It makes every action feel emotionally loaded. A post becomes a referendum on identity. A pitch becomes proof of worth. A no becomes humiliation. A low-view video becomes a statement about your future. Cleaner thinking says no, this is training. This is data. This is the rep. This is the part where the nervous system learns not to panic in contact with reality. That shift alone changes behavior more than another month of inspirational content ever will. One of the most striking parts of the book is how it describes comfort addiction. Not luxury comfort, familiar discomfort, the comfort of the same complaints, the comfort of the same low standard, the comfort of scrolling instead of deciding, the comfort of not posting, the comfort of being the person with untapped potential instead of the person with tested capability, the comfort of criticizing visible people from the shadows, the comfort of saying you are overwhelmed while protecting the habits that keep you weak. Familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar growth. This is why the phone becomes such an important symbol in the script. The phone is not evil, but for millions of people it has become the perfect machine for preserving weak language. It feeds comparison, distraction, fake productivity, and emotional outsourcing. A person can spend all evening jumping between money clips, AI demos, financial podcasts, news panic, productivity advice, and creators talking about freedom, then go to sleep with the illusion that they engaged with their future. They did not. They only touched the edges of the movement of others while remaining still. Short-form dopamine is especially dangerous because it teaches the mind to crave stimulation without effort. It fills the nervous system with urgency and empties the day of deep work. It also gives weak thinkers endless material for rationalization. They know what is happening in every industry. They know what tools are trending. They know what side hustle people are talking about. They know what algorithm change creators are complaining about. They know which app people say is dead and which one people say is exploding, yet they still do not build. Information becomes another hiding place. Staying updated feels easier than becoming useful. If this message is landing uncomfortably, good. That means the mirror is working. And if you recognize yourself in even 3 of these patterns, press like on this video so the algorithm pushes more honest content instead of sugar-coated noise. Not because likes are magical, because platforms respond to signals, and most people are drowning in soft lies that make inaction feel noble. Honest pressure needs help traveling. The book also explores victim identity with unusual precision. Victim identity is not always loud. It is often subtle, educated, almost tasteful. It shows up as a constant focus on what is unfair, without a serious parallel focus on what is still possible. It shows up as a person who can explain every market problem, every structural shift, every downside of automation, every unfair advantage others have, but cannot list the last 5 difficult actions they took to improve their own position. Analysis becomes anesthesia. The person feels morally correct and practically unchanged. Again, this does not mean the world is fair. It means obsession with unfairness can become an alibi, especially now. In 2026, the labor market is tense, global, and weird. Credentials matter, but proof matters. Experience matters, but adaptability matters. AI can remove certain tasks, but it can also multiply certain people. The creator economy looks crowded, but attention still moves toward clarity, trust, specificity, and consistency. Remote work is harder to land, but visible proof, sharp communication, and specialized usefulness still create openings. The world is changing. Weak minds use that as a eulogy. Stronger minds use it as a map. The book gives a brutal example many people will recognize. Someone spends months complaining that AI will replace everyone. Every conversation ends there. Every new tool becomes evidence that there is no point trying. But in all those months, they never learned how to use AI to research faster, edit faster, serve clients faster, prototype ideas, automate admin, improve outreach, create samples, simplify workflows, or increase output quality. They did not respond to the wave. They narrated the wave. Then they acted shocked when others used the same technology as leverage. It gives another example that hurts because it is so common. A person says they want freedom, but the idea of being visible online terrifies them. They want opportunities to find them, but do not want to post proof of work, thoughts, results, experiments, case studies, process, or useful insight. They say personal brand is cringe. Sometimes it is, but their deeper fear is that visibility creates accountability. Once you are seen, you can be judged. Once you are known for something, you have to keep showing up. Remaining invisible preserves the fantasy that you could have been great without forcing you to prove anything. Then there is the person who says online money is fake, while spending hours every week watching creators monetize attention in real time. That skepticism is often not wisdom. It is bitterness protecting an inactive life. It is easier to dismiss a model than to learn the uncomfortable mechanics behind it. Building trust, writing clearly, understanding pain, posting consistently, handling judgment, learning offers, staying present long enough for compounding to matter. Cynicism can look intelligent, but many times it is failed courage that learned to sound sharp. Another powerful section of this script hits the person who tracks every expense but never improves income. Budgeting matters. Waste matters. Good habits matter. But some people use financial control as a substitute for financial growth. They squeeze another $10 out of subscriptions, optimize cashback apps, compare prices obsessively, move tiny amounts between savings buckets, and still never face the bigger question. How do I become more valuable? How do I earn more? How do I build a second stream? How do I make my skill easier to buy? How do I reduce dependence on one source? Precision without expansion can become another sophisticated form of fear. The weak mind loves control over small things because big moves threaten identity. It is easier to optimize spending than to raise your rate. Easier to cut streaming services than to publish your work. Easier to study trends than to become visible inside them. Easier to talk about passive income than to build active proof. Easier to resent confident people than to practice confident behavior badly for 6 months. That is the hidden game. People do not only avoid pain, they choose the kind of pain that lets their self-image stay intact. The book refuses to let the viewer stay neutral. It asks a savage question. What if the problem is not that you have not found the right strategy? What if the problem is that your inner language keeps rejecting every strategy the moment it requires discomfort? Because strategy is easy to discuss. Action is where the phrases attack. You say you want a side income, then the phrase says, I am too tired tonight. You say you want clients, then the phrase says, I do not want to look needy. You say you want a better role, then the phrase says, I am not qualified enough. You say you want to post, then the phrase says, people from school will see it. You say you want freedom, then the phrase says, let us wait until things calm down. Strategy is not your bottleneck. Inner permission is. That is why this fictional book feels like a mental reset instead of another success sermon. It does not worship morning routines, luxury fantasies, or overnight wins. It goes straight to the sentence level. It understands that language is not decoration. Language directs perception. Perception directs behavior. Behavior creates outcomes. If a person keeps feeding themselves language that frames discomfort as danger, visibility as vanity, selling as dirt, risk as irresponsibility, and money as moral compromise, then even good opportunities will feel wrong in their body. They will sabotage the very moves they claim to want. The stronger replacement is not a motivational high. It is a more stable internal operating system. One that says discomfort does not mean misalignment. Visibility does not mean ego. Selling does not mean manipulation. Starting small does not mean thinking small. Being judged does not mean being ruined. A slow beginning does not mean a doomed future. Attention can be used ethically. Money can be handled cleanly. Learning must lead to execution. Confidence follows proof. Proof follows reps. Reps require tolerance for imperfection. That is adult thinking. And adult thinking produces different choices in ordinary moments. You stop waiting for the perfect energy. You make the call anyway. You stop hiding behind another course. You make the basic offer anyway. You stop pretending the market is closed. You enter with sharper ears. You stop acting allergic to attention. You post useful work. You stop worshiping safety. You build range. You stop calling yourself misunderstood. You communicate more simply. You stop talking about freedom while guarding your comfort like a sacred object. You trade a little comfort for a little self-respect, then you do it again tomorrow. The book is especially good when it talks about self-respect, not confidence. Self-respect. Confidence rises and falls. Self-respect is deeper. It grows when you stop betraying yourself in tiny ways. When you say you will do something and then do at least part of it. When you stop using intelligence as a hiding place. When you stop letting emotion veto every difficult move. When you stop pretending that your standards are high when the truth is your tolerance for discomfort is low. Self-respect is expensive to build and easy to erode. Weak phrases erode it daily. That erosion matters financially because a person with low self-respect makes timid money decisions. They undercharge. They delay asking. They accept poor treatment. They keep weak clients. They avoid negotiation. They abandon good ideas too quickly. They spend to soothe themselves after a day of avoidance. They seek cheap relief online because their inner life feels heavy. They let subscriptions pile up because each one represents a fantasy self they have not become. They buy systems instead of building discipline. They chase tools instead of building proof. The money leak is not only in the account, it is in the identity. If you want a follow-up breakdown on how to replace these phrases one by one in daily life, comment the word reset below. Not for vanity. Because when people name the shift publicly, they stop treating change like a private daydream and start giving it weight. And I want to know if this kind of honest analysis is what you want more of on this channel. One of the final movements in the script confronts a painful reality. Many people are not trapped by inability. They are trapped by the emotional rewards of staying weak. Staying weak can excuse you from risk. Staying weak can keep expectations low. Staying weak can preserve your social circle. Staying weak can protect you from envy directed at you. Staying weak can let you keep saying one day without confronting today. That does not mean weakness feels good. It means weakness can feel familiar enough to become psychologically convenient. This is why transformation often feels like grief before it feels like power. You have to grieve the old phrases, grieve the old excuses. Grieve the elegant image of yourself as the thoughtful person who never acted because conditions were not ideal. Grieve the identity of the hidden talented person. Grieve the moral superiority of not caring too much. Grieve the fantasy that one future burst of motivation was going to solve what years of avoidance created. Stronger thinking is not just new words. It is the death of a comforting self-story. The book does not ask you to become loud, fake, obsessed, or ruthless. It asks for something much more serious. It asks you to stop lying to yourself in polished sentences. That is the whole war. Not every battle, but the central war. Because once the inner language changes, a lot of outer behavior becomes possible. You no longer need perfect certainty to test. You no longer need endless approval to begin. You no longer need protection from every possible embarrassment. You no longer treat money as a dirty topic. You no longer confuse invisibility with integrity. You no longer treat your own potential as a museum exhibit. Imagine what changes if the phrase "I am just being realistic" becomes "I am being avoidant right now." Imagine what changes if "I am not ready yet" becomes "I am scared and I can still move." Imagine what changes if "the market is too saturated" becomes "I need a sharper angle and more reps." Imagine what changes if "I am bad at selling" becomes "I have not trained this skill yet." Imagine what changes if "I do not want attention" becomes "I need the right people to know I exist." Imagine what changes if "at least I am safe" becomes "I am slowly shrinking." Those replacements are not cute. They are clarifying. And clarity changes behavior. That is why this fictional book can change a person. Not because it promises fast wealth. It does not. Not because it tells you to think rich and wait for magic. It does not. It can change you because it names the private sentences that have been running your life without your permission. Once a hidden script is exposed, it loses some power. Once a weak phrase is recognized as a shield instead of a truth, you can choose differently. And different choices, repeated long enough, change finances, habits, self-respect, and trajectory. Maybe the hardest line in the whole script is this: your life is not only built by what you do, it is built by what you refuse to do while calling your refusal wisdom. Sit with that. The world has real barriers. Yes. But many people are adding invisible bars of their own and then blaming the whole cage on reality. They say they want more money, more freedom, more control, more dignity, more options, more relief. But in the daily moments where those things begin, their inner language says no. Not now. Too risky. Too visible. Too late. Too crowded. Too awkward. Too small. Too much. Those phrases do not feel like enemies because they have been inside your voice for years. They sound like you. That is why they are so dangerous. A thought does not have to be true to feel personal. A sentence repeated often enough starts wearing your face. This book rips that mask off. It says that voice is not always your wisdom. Sometimes it is your fear speaking fluent logic. Sometimes it is your wounded pride pretending to be standards. Sometimes it is your comfort addiction pretending to be peace. Sometimes it is your insecurity pretending to be humility. If that hurts, it is supposed to. Not to shame you. To wake you up. Because shame freezes. Clarity moves. The point is not to call yourself broken. The point is to stop calling weakness by beautiful names. Once you do that, you can finally negotiate with reality honestly. You can look at your skill level without drama. You can look at your spending without denial. You can look at your distractions without romanticizing them. You can look at your hidden fear of being seen and admit how much income it has cost you. You can look at the hours you gave to consumption and ask why creation still scares you. You can look at your phone and ask whether it has been a tool or a tranquilizer. Then the path gets simpler, not easier, but simpler. Learn what increases value. Practice what improves communication. Build proof. Get visible in ways you can sustain. Sell cleanly. Follow through. Reduce your addiction to being comfortable. Increase your tolerance for small rejection. Replace analysis loops with tests. Replace passive admiration with active imitation. Replace fragile identity with useful behavior. Replace waiting with scheduled action. Replace fake realism with measurable adaptation. Replace the need to feel special with a willingness to become effective. Some people will hear this and still choose the old phrases. They will call it balance. They will call it peace. They will call it not chasing. They will call it being grounded. Maybe for some that is true, but many will use soft language to cover a hard fact. They are afraid to put themselves in motion, afraid of judgment, afraid of selling, afraid of looking average at first, afraid of entering a visible game where excuses stop working, afraid of discovering that the life they want demands a version of them they have been resisting. And that is the final confrontation this book delivers. The main barrier may not be lack of opportunity. It may be your resistance to becoming the kind of person who can hold opportunity, the person who can tolerate uncertainty, who can ask without crumbling, who can learn tools without panic, who can compete without melodrama, who can be seen without treating every opinion as a wound, who can handle money without guilt, Who can keep going without constant inspiration? Who can build quietly and sell clearly? Who can stop turning intelligence into excuses? If you hear yourself in that, good. That means the script found the right nerve. Do not just nod and move on. Pick one phrase that has been running your life. 1, not 10. 1. Maybe it is I am not ready yet. Maybe it is I do not want attention. Maybe it is I am bad at selling. Maybe it is the market is too saturated. Maybe it is I need more time. Maybe it is at least I am safe. Pull it into the light and stop calling it truth. Call it what it is. A sentence that has been costing you money, courage, and years. Because in the end, weak thinking does not only keep people poor in cash, it keeps them poor in agency, poor in self-trust, poor in options, poor in range, poor in courage, poor in momentum. And once a person becomes poor in those things, the bank account usually follows. Stronger thinking does not guarantee a rich life, but without it, weakness becomes normal, avoidance becomes identity, and the future gets negotiated downward before it even arrives. So the message of this fictional book is not dream bigger. It is speak cleaner. Stop feeding yourself phrases that make weakness sound wise. Stop rewarding fear for wearing a suit. Stop calling self-sabotage maturity. Stop treating hesitation like a personality. Stop kneeling to comfort while asking life for freedom. Stop worshiping safety in a world that is changing too fast for static people to survive comfortably. Stop consuming courage from other people's content while refusing to practice your own. Your thinking keeps you poor is a brutal title because it makes the conflict personal. And that is where power returns. If thinking helps trap you, thinking can also help release you. Not through fantasy, through cleaner language, stronger standards, better interpretation, and repeated action. The subtitle says, "The phrases in your head that make a person weak and poor." That is the real battlefield. Not because language is magic, but because language directs the hand before the hand ever moves. So the next time the old voice says, "Be realistic," ask whether it means adapt or retreat. The next time it says wait, ask what exactly you think waiting will solve. The next time it says you do not know enough, ask whether learning has become camouflage. The next time it says you hate selling, ask whether you really hate selling or just hate being vulnerable. The next time it says you do not want attention, ask whether invisibility has become your excuse. The next time it says at least you are safe, ask what your current safety is costing you every month in missed growth, lower income, and smaller identity. Then act before the answer gets polished into another excuse. Make the ugly draft. Send the clear message. Learn the tool. Cut the dead habit. Build the sample. Ask for the rate. Post the work. Enter the room. Stay in the process long enough to become harder to ignore. Let your future be built by cleaner truths instead of familiar lies. Because a weak life is rarely announced by one dramatic collapse. More often, it is assembled quietly, one protective sentence at a time. And a stronger life is built the same way, one honest replacement at a time, until the person in the mirror no longer sounds like fear pretending to be wisdom. They sound like someone who finally decided that comfort is not self-respect, avoidance is not intelligence, and silence is not safety. That is when things start changing. Not all at once, not in a movie scene, in ordinary days, in sharper choices, in cleaner hours, in better work, in stronger asks, in less hiding, in more proof, in more capacity. In the slow, undeniable shift from watching life happen to participating in it. And once that shift begins, the phrases that used to control you start sounding smaller, weaker, almost embarrassing. Not because you became perfect, because you finally stopped treating your own fear like a trusted advisor. That is the point. Not to become fearless. To become harder to control with weak language. Harder to delay with polished excuses, harder to distract with fake productivity, harder to keep poor in a world that profits from your hesitation. When that happens, even before the money changes, something else changes first. Your posture, your decisions, your sense that your future is not a rumor, it is a build. And builds are made by people who stop negotiating with the phrases that keep them small.